Welcome to the I Hate Critics Movie Review Podcast. I'm professional film critic Sean Patrick. With me is Jeff.
Hello, how are you?
Jeff, where can they find your art?
JeffLassiter.com is my website. I'm Jeff Lassiter at bsky.social. On my internet or my Instagram and Facebook are currently not connected, except to get on this call. So yeah, find me there. Find me in Blue Sky. It's great.
Yeah, be careful on Facebook today. Apparently Mark Zuckerberg decided to connect everyone to President Trump, whether they wanted to follow him or not.
That's what I'm hearing. I also I signed into Instagram for one of my jobs to post something, and all my suggestions were people connected to the new Reich.
Yeah, that's weird. That's weird.
Totally strange. Yeah.
I wonder what's going on. Anyway, not important. Let's move on.
Yeah.
Let's see. We're going to talk about it later, but let's just do a little bit about, at the top of the show about the fact that David Lynch passed away. Of course, our classic tonight is going to be Blue Velvet, and we'll be talking about that at the end of the show. But Jeff, your initial reaction when you heard that David Lynch had passed away?
Oh no, that's too bad. I've never been a huge David Lynch person. I think we talked about that when we talked about Dune last year. I like him as a person, but I've never really I hated Eraserhead so much. And I never really watched Twin Peaks or anything. So I haven't seen a lot of his stuff. So this was actually the first time I'd seen Blue Velvet. But him as a person, though, I really liked him. I liked his public persona, I guess, and how he was with his fans and with interviewers and things like that. So yeah, I completely agree that it's a huge loss, because he did have a very very specific talent. So
an incredibly unique director. I shared your opinion on Eraserhead. I couldn't get through it when we watched it for the show, and the first time I saw it when I was in my 20s, I could not get through it twice actually. So and just so it's just I found it incredibly off-putting. But after I saw Mulholland Drive in 2005, 4 or 5, whenever that came out, and it ended up on my top 10 movies, and I think I sort of got the David Lynch thing. I began to kind of understand what it is that was so appealing about his work, and it's about it's about feel, it's about vibe, it's about being on his wavelength. But my initial reaction when I first the first Lynch movies I saw were trying to get through Eraserhead, and then trying to get through Blue Velvet, and I did get through it the first time. I think I was 21 years old when I watched it for the first time, and I desperately battled with it and decided I hated it and never wanted to see it again. But we'll talk more about that later on in the show. But it's a tremendous loss. He was an incredible talent, and just a very unique man. The Straight Story is a G-rated movie that couldn't be more earnest and straightforward, and it's brilliant. It's goddamn brilliant. And that's such a weird thing. It seemed like such an outlier, but then when you dig down on it, when you watch The Straight Story, it's just so bizarre to think that there are actually Lynchian elements to this G-rated movie, and that's just a testament to his incredible talent. Is that he could do anything he wanted, but he chose to be as weird as he is. Is it right that he was around the time that he chose to do Dune? Had he not been discussed for one of the Star Wars movies?
Yeah, he was. There was originally he was George Lucas's first pick to direct Return of the Jedi.
Wow!
And after seeing Dune, I don't know how I could. I don't know how I feel about that.
There are a lot of other things other than him that were wrong with Dune, but yeah. I don't know what he would have done with a Star Wars. I don't know. But then again, I mean, I would have thought he would be able to direct a straight story. But
yeah,
interesting thing about Lynch, one of the weirdest parts of his career was he was on a Family Guy spinoff, the Cleveland Show, where he played himself as a local bartender in
Yeah.
a fictional town. And they just a completely straight version of himself, but just saying these outrageous things here and there. And just it's outrageous the fact that, you know, David Lynch is the bartender at this small town tavern. I just love the notion that he just thought, yeah, I'll do that. That's weird.
He did have a really, really amazing sense of humor.
Mm-hmm.
You know, one of my there's that meme that goes around, especially nowadays, of him you know, saying someday it'll all be great and everything will be perfect and wonderful. And then he looks out the window, he goes, today's not that day. And I have a feeling I'm going to be saying that a lot the next few years.
All right. So like I said, more on David Lynch later on in the show. Meanwhile, the weekend box office struggled again. It was a holiday weekend, so there's that. Mufasa the Lion King, $11.7 million. One of them days, 11.6. They're nearly unseating the top movie of the weekend. Wolfman definitely underperformed. I think people expected more than 10.9 million for the weekend. Then Sonic and Den of Thieves rounding out the top five. But I think both of us, Jeff, thought Wolfman for sure would be probably the top movie of the weekend just because it's a horror movie.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of surprised that it didn't do better. I mean, this weekend sucked, of course, because half the country is buried under snow and cold and ice, and the other half is burning. So, and you know, President's Day weekend is not a great weekend for to have that stuff happen. Plus the, you know, the Reich Rising and all that. I don't think people were really into the movies just in general. So,
well, Wolfman, of course, is a horror film directed by Leigh Whannell, who is, of course, known for as the co-writer and creator of the Saw franchise, and as well as the director of The Invisible Man with Elizabeth Moss, which was one of my favorite films of the year that one came out. Mm-hmm. This film stars Christopher Abbott as a family man who's raising a daughter alongside his wife, played by Julia Garner. They are going to Oregon to tend to his father's cabin. His father has disappeared. There's something going on with that disappearance related to perhaps a man animal of some sort. They arrive in Oregon and are immediately just involved in the situation where they see this monster in the middle of the road and they end up crashing the vehicle they're driving, and thus begins a fight for their life, including Christopher Abbott's character getting scratched by the wolf and becoming a werewolf himself. I really enjoyed this. I had a great time. I'm not a big fan of werewolf movies. I really just I've not liked really hardly any werewolf movies that I've seen. I laughed at the Howling movies. Those were funny. Cursed is funny in all the wrong ways. But like American Werewolf in London, it didn't do anything for me. Just kind of lays there as far as I'm concerned. I think the effects are interesting, but David Naughton especially has never been very impressive to me. But I did have a great time with this because I think Christopher Abbott was terrific, and I love Leigh Whannell's direction. His use of sound is so impeccable. He did this with the Saw movies. He did this with Invisible Man as well, where he puts the thought in your head of everything that you cannot see and building that tension via sound just so perfectly. That really is what gets me every time I watch something that he does. That, and he's really terrific at choosing how to move his camera. The camera moves in his films are very precise. He is intending to give you just enough visual information, but never the full picture. And again, he's allowing you to fill in so much of the horror, which I think is so much with the right movie. It can be so much more interesting than actually seeing all of the blood and guts. I want to see some blood and guts, but it depends on the movies. Like Terrifier, if they're not, dripping blood and guts everywhere, I'm a little bit bored. That's why we're here for Terrifier. But, depending on the movie, if the movie is not intended to be super gory, you want to just put the thought in my head of how gory it's going to be or is, that's cool. I'm down with that. And I think Leigh Whannell does that as well or better than any other horror movie director working today. I think the guy is brilliant. I don't know if this movie is brilliant necessarily, but I think it's very good.
The first 45 minutes of this movie is a great movie. The setup is really good. I like the interplay between the characters, and they're, showing you, not telling you what's going on in their marriage. I think it's beautifully shot. Like you said, the sound is incredible. I just the soundscape that they make when you're in the theater seeing this, and you just never know quite where, because it is so dark on purpose, because they're in a house with no electricity, that you do get that point where it's like the sound is all around you, and you can kind of understand why, Charlotte, played by Julia Garner, is kind of looking around the way she is. The transformation it is way more David Cronenberg's The Fly, and way more body horror than any other previous werewolf movie that I've seen has been. Almost more of a psychological wolf for most of it, until you get the scene where he hears this knocking inside this closet upstairs, and you're convinced that it's the wolf man who has already attacked them, coming back and breaking in. But no, his hearing has jumped up so much that all he hears is a furry-legged spider in the closet. I mean, it's stuff like that really sets it apart. I don't know. It feels like Invisible Man was one of my favorites of 2020. And it feels like that was a little more elevated horror than this is, even though this seems like it's going for it with the cast that we have. Because both Julia Garner and Christopher Abbott have been in some pretty prestigious things so far. Craven doesn't count. It seems like it's going for a little more elevated, but it doesn't work as an elevated horror movie for me as much as it does, kind of just a straight kind of character study. Like we talked about The Last Showgirl and how that was a vibe more than it was a movie.
Right.
This seems like a character study in how one man can go from, kind of the perfect father who cares so much about his daughter to this monster, and then kind of back to that character. Julia Garner, I don't think is given enough. I mean, she's given a lot, don't get me wrong, but I don't think her character, aside from a couple lines, I don't think you get the sense of her in the beginning. You see her in a high power suit and saying she doesn't think she's very good at being a mom, but that's about all you get until I'm very suddenly thrust into the action of this movie. So I thought it was very, very good. And then it was good.
Yeah.
I'm not knocking it at all. I enjoyed it. I thought it was longer than it was. So I did run out to the restroom, and the next thing I know, I come back and there's only a few minutes left. And I was like, wait a minute. I thought this was 2 hours.
I get what you're saying though. In that way, I'm thinking I'm thinking like Immaculate, a movie like Immaculate, which is a slow burn, and then when you get to that second half, it finds another level as it heads towards the third act, and then explodes in this big burst of oh my fucking God, which makes that movie so great. And that doesn't necessarily happen here. The ending of this one is projected out pretty far, and they're kind of going for a relatively obvious tragedy. That said, I still enjoy how they got there, but yeah, it doesn't have second gear. It doesn't have that big final surprise to really send you home with something that you're saying, oh my fucking God.
A movie like Immaculate, that goes that's in first gear, second gear, third gear, fourth gear, and all of a sudden, just as it's getting into fourth gear, it kicks up to sixth. This is a steady kind of third and fourth gear movie, and it does towards the very end get up to like fifth gear. I did think that the opening sequence uh, was really beautifully shot, gorgeous scenery, and really had that sense of like dread. What's going to happen? Are we going to get like a massacre? Because we don't, you don't know who the kid is, you don't know who the dad is, so they could just both be murdered or turned into werewolves or whatever. And this is technically a werewolf movie. It doesn't have any of the tropes of a werewolf movie. And like you, I
no moonlight transitions, nothing like that.
Yeah, there's and most of the werewolf tropes that we have are stuff that we learned from the Wolfman and its sequels, not necessarily actual werewolf lore. This could be closer to that, to the actual lore. So, again, a really interesting body horror kind of character study, and also completely works as a movie. It'll probably go into my rotation every October, or on a full moon or something, even though it's not a full moon movie, obviously, but it's good. And the acting is really good. I have a huge thing for Christopher Abbott. I think he's great. And he was great in Possessor. Everything he does, with the exception of Craven, is kind of standout. So
he's amazing, and everybody should see his, aside from Craven, see his movies, because he is really tremendous. He did a movie, I think it was with Margaret Qualley, the title of which is escaping me, but it's just the two of them in a sexual power play in a hotel room, and it is phenomenal. It's a really great movie that everybody should see. But I do recommend Wolfman. I was a little bummed to see that it didn't perform well. I guess it's getting kind of mixed reviews, which kind of surprised me. I think people are a little bit too grumpy about it, but nevertheless, I think it's pretty good. And they've already announced, Jeff, that it's going to be on Peacock in April. So
yeah, I'm surprised it's going to take that long, honestly.
Well, that doesn't. They did. This was announced ahead of time, so maybe they didn't factor in the box office.
Yeah,
whether or not it's around long.
I don't mean that as a bad thing, but that's literally how things are. The window is so small. I'm very surprised that it's taking that long.
All right, so I didn't get a chance to see One of Them Days, but you did. This is directed by a guy named Lawrence Lamont, and it stars Keke Palmer and SZA as best friends and roommates in South Los Angeles on their frantic efforts to recover their missing rent money. Tell us what you thought of this one.
This was really fun. I've said this many, many, many times before that my comedy is not my my favorite, but I do like these kind of buddy chase comedies. And One of Them Days it hits everywhere, because everybody has had that roommate that just completely fucks up your life on at least one occasion. And this is a lot about that kind of relationship where you've got somebody who has got goals and has very set ways to get to that goal, and is gonna do it, and has that roommate who is just like, girl, I'm enjoying the ride and doing my thing. And it hinges on, it's the first of the month, and they're talking, at the beginning of the movie, about how the first just kind of throws everything off for everybody. And they live in an apartment that is falling apart, and it's kind of a shithole. They call it, it's in the jungles. And they have the rent money, they're going to pay it. And then one of the, Alyssa, played by SZA, her boyfriend, who has basically just been staying there rent free, he's supposed to take the money to the landlord. He does not. He invests it in Gucci t-shirts, not Gucci, but Gucci. And he's going to make the money back, but they have to come up with $1,500 by 6 o'clock that day. And this is one of those, it's one of those great movies where they're taken in every direction. They're going to get this money this way. They get the money, then they lose the money, then they get it back. And then, there's one scene where you think that Dreux, played by Keke Palmer, she's obsessed with this guy who keeps coming into Mama Ruth's apartment / general store, and his name is Maniac. And Maniac. And you think that, he's probably a pretty bad guy based on the fact that his name is Maniac. And he mentions in passing that he went to juvie and all this. So she finds an axe in his car. So you're kind of set up to think that he's one of the big bads in the movie pretty early. And the way that all plays out is pretty funny, pretty good. There's a scene with Janelle James, whose name I was trying to think of last week, from Abbott Elementary, who is so funny. She's just her very presence made me laugh. She's a blood bank employee who used to be a stripper. That's in the trailer. I really, really, really liked this movie. I thought it was fun. I thought that the characterizations of the people in it are people we know. There's the spoiled white girl, Bethany, who's coming in to gentrify the apartment complex, and everybody's looking at her like, it just, Keyshawn, who is Alyssa's boyfriend, who gets their money. The way that he is, he's picked up with this lady named Bernice, who is the definition of a bad bitch, and the way that all plays out, I laughed throughout the whole thing. That Cat Williams was funny, and then he kind of went a little over with it. But just in general, this is a fun day at the movies. I recommend it.
Yeah, Cat Williams is all over the trailer, probably trying to take advantage of his sort of viral fame of the last year or so. Mm-hmm. I mean, he's been famous for a long time, but he's popped up in the last year and a half, though, as the world's truth teller or something. And kind of curious about his role, because he's all over the trailer.
Yeah, he's a character named Lucky. He's the one who they're going to go to the check cashing place to get some money, and he's like, "Don't do it, don't do it." And that kind of from that moment on, he's in the rest of the movie, kind of their moral compass. So, but yeah, the scene in the blood bank, I laughed really hard. The people in front of me and in back of me, one guy was whooping so hard I couldn't hear a couple of things. He was laughing so hard at it. So yeah, I recommend it.
Yeah, that's a very positive review right there. Our next movie is called A Different Man, and this one came out just last year from A24. It was at the 2024 Sundance Film Festival. It was named to the National Border Review's Top 10 Movies of the Year, as well as the Top 50 Sight and Sound Movies of 2024. It stars Sebastian Stan as Edward, a man with facial disfigurement who undergoes a procedure to transform his appearance. Renata Rensby plays his neighbor, who he's been obsessed with, but he doesn't think that she would be interested in him with this facial disfigurement. Then there's Adam Pearson as a character who will show up later in the movie. And this movie is kind of incredible. It's a dark psychological comedy. It's about identity and what makes you, and the how you shape yourself, but also how you shape how other people see you. And it's also just got some big weird ideas that just really pay off very well. It's quite good. And Sebastian Stan has been taking so many big risks, which I just really appreciate. The man takes big swings. I didn't like that Tommy Lee, Pamela Anderson thing that he did, but he took a big swing in that movie, so to speak. He
was swinging something, that's for sure.
And here he's playing a very interesting character who goes from having this massive facial disfigurement to being Sebastian Stan, really super handsome. And then he's got to try and that is, the girl that he's obsessed with is a playwright, and she's making a play about the relationship she had with the man that he was. And he's got to like try and put his old face back on to try and play this character and get back into the headspace. And he can't do it. And it is fascinating to watch. But Adam Pearson is a real show stealer. He is so great in this. I have a weird familiarity with him because I saw him for the first time playing board games on YouTube, on this YouTube channel that I like. And he was so charming and engaging on that. Then when I heard that he was going to be doing this, I got very excited and was very happy to see him. And he's absolutely terrific. And of course, I think they could have done a little bit more with Renata Rensby. I think this felt like a little bit of a stock role that she wasn't really given as much to improve, but she does the best she can with it. And to that point, I think that aspect of the writing is probably the weakest part of the movie, but it's still so strong that it doesn't take away entirely from this movie.
Yeah, I probably wasn't going to see this, but I had to get Max. Just because I wanted to watch Star Wars Skeleton Crew, and my friend who usually sends it to me he's out of town, so he wasn't downloading anything. I mean, streaming anything for me. And my other friend who was letting me use her Disney Plus account decided not to. So whatever. So I'm like, I'll download this just for a month. And I saw that this was streaming. So I'm like, you know what? Let's talk about it, because we didn't really get a chance to talk about it because you'd seen it, but I hadn't. Bob hadn't at the end of the year show. I didn't realize until about 3/4 of the way through that it was supposed to be a comedy, like a dark comedy. I was taking at face value, and I was like, "Oh, wow, everybody's so terrible." And then like it was. I kept thinking of Bad Santa, and I'll tell you why. Renata Rensby, is that how you say her name?
I think so.
She kept just like, she was Lauren Graham in that movie who was obsessed with fucking Santa. And, like she had, at first you think she's just being nice because she had that adverse reaction when she first saw Edward in the hallway, when she goes like that. And you think, okay, she goes over to make nice and, let him know that she's a nice neighbor and whatever. And then it turns out, no, she really just wants to fuck him because he's disfigured. And that was really gross to me at first. And then when I slowly started to realize it was kind of a comedy, I'm like, oh, okay, never mind. I'm an idiot. Not everybody in this movie is terrible to him or even bad to him. When his this experimental treatment that he goes through to become, quote unquote, normal again. When that scene came up, I wasn't sure if he was actually, if for a while, if that had actually happened when he's peeling his face off, or if that was just the rest of the movie was him imagining at that point what it would be like.
Right.
And even after watching the whole thing and realizing, that it probably wasn't meant to be that way. It probably was meant to be a straight story. That it almost was interesting in my head to think that everything that happened after he peeled his old face off was in his head, and how would I deal with it if this works, instead of this worked and look how my life went. So I don't know, some interesting ideas.
It is a lot of interesting ideas, and I didn't necessarily take it that she had a kink for disfigurement necessarily. I think she genuinely found him to be a nice person that she wanted to spend time with and was open to a relationship. And he was kind of more of a typical man who's not actually picking up the signals that she's giving and is just so locked in his own self-loathing, he can't see himself as being attractive. And then once he becomes attractive, he really finds out how truly unattractive he actually is. And that to me was the real exciting part, because when it comes to her and Adam Pearson, he is such a nice guy, such a likable, lovable guy. I didn't have a problem at all believing that she would fall for him and go for him and want to be with him.
There were a couple moments where I kind of, I wasn't sure what her motivation was, whether it was a, like a kink or a fetish, or she just spent enough time with both of these guys that she saw the humanity that you're not really set to see. So
I think there's an issue there with like I said, with the writing of her character that can be a little bit inconsistent. They could have underlined a little bit better what her true motivation was. They're also trying to go for this sort of absurdist vibe as well, because that does play into how the movie is going to play out. And it's also, we've got an unreliable narrator in as well at play with he's telling the story. This is his story from his perspective, and obviously he's going to be the victim of all this. And I think that also is a fun way. I thought this movie was very clever in how it used its devices.
Yeah, I didn't love it. It was one of those. It was kind of like the Wolfman. I for the first 45 minutes, I was like, oh, okay, this is really, I want to see where it's happening. And then when stuff started to happen, I was like, well, I don't know how I feel about this. And then about 3/4 of the way, like I said, I realized, oh, this is absurdist comedy. It's not, a character study of this man with with tumors all over his face. It's not that. It's more of kind of a wish fulfillment that goes awry kind of movie that we've seen a lot of. So
yes, that the old be careful what you wish for trope does play in, but
and the fact that objectively the Adam Pearson, who has these facial deformities, is the most relatable character in this movie. That's really like one of the things that I really liked about it.
Yeah,
because he's just a normal guy who's he doesn't let anything get to him too badly. The last 10 minutes of the movie, I was like, what the fuck is happening?
Yeah, that I really liked the ending. I liked what I especially loved just the way Sebastian Stan played just how weird and absurd it all really is, but also it's really all happening. You're like, how is this really all happening? Yeah, I dig this movie pretty well, and I do hope people will find it. I'm glad to see Sebastian Stan getting some attention. He's probably not going to get an Oscar nomination on Thursday morning as we're recording this. That's when they're going to announce them. I don't think he's going to get a nomination because the category is so incredibly strong, and this movie doesn't quite have the profile, but he's deserving of all the attention that he's gotten so far, and he's going to get there if he keeps doing stuff like this.
I honestly, for supporting actor, I would go for Adam Pearson, just because he sets the tone for like the baseline for the movie.
Yeah,
he's the everyman, whereas Edward is this insane person who has let this deformity get to him, and she might be into guys like that just in general. So she's a little wacky. Everything was a little more absurdist, but he kind of brings it all to a human. I don't mean this in a bad way. A human kind of performance with somebody who looks the way he does, where it might be, he might be the one in a normal movie that's not about this, like Under the Skin, where he was, he is the one that's so jarring and is played that way.
Yeah, he's not the subject. He's not the subject of the humor of the movie.
Yeah, yeah. So I don't know. I mean, I think I don't. I would I would see him before Sebastian Stan. So
All right, let's get on to our classic this week from 1986. It's Blue Velvet, written and directed by David Lynch and starring Kyle MacLachlan, Laura Dern, Isabella Rossellini, and Dennis Hopper. The story set in a small town where this kid, Jeffrey Beaumont, comes back to his hometown after his dad has some sort of bizarre accident. And he's going to take over dad's work at the hardware store, but he's also going to get himself involved in this murder case because he finds an ear in a field full of weeds and he takes it to the cops, and then he becomes obsessed with this. He wants to know where the ear came from. How did it get in the weeds? How did it you know who does it belong to? He wants to know all these things. He becomes obsessed with this crime to the point where he kind of pumps Sandy, the daughter, Laura Dern. Her dad is the detective looking into the case, and he pumps her for information, and she's eager to give it to him so she can kind of court his favor. And he uses that to get himself inside the case, which involves Dorothy Valens, played by Isabella Rossellini. He gets inside of her house and he's snooping around. He wants to find clues. She comes home and things begin to really happen in that sort of David Lynch way. I was I was very I was very closed minded as a kid. You know, I found this film incredibly challenging when I was young, and I didn't want to face that challenge. And this time, I feel like I really did watch this movie for the first time because it is incredible. We're talking about from the opening moments when we light up on that beautiful white picket fence to returning to that image at the very end. It's really about the surface areas, the idea of the American dream versus what's actually happening, the roiling, boiling cauldron of corruption and crime and drugs and violence that we would all like to pretend isn't there. And we're talking about 1986, and you've got Reagan talking about even at that time he was talking about "Make America Great Again," and they're talking about taking us back to the 1950s when everything was great. And the name Jeffrey Beaumont is a reference to Hugh Beaumont, the dad on Leave It to Beaver. Like that's an intentional thing that he does, a little Easter egg, a little breadcrumb for you to know exactly what he's going for here. The bright, sunny surface level of this small town is, it's Donna Reed, it's Ozzie and Harriet, it's Leave It to Beaver. And then underneath that, you've got Dennis Hopper, Frank Booth, who comes just raging into this movie like a man on fire, just destroying everything in front of him, spitting these four-letter words just everywhere and just saying the most outlandish shit and doing the most outlandish shit, just taking all of his, sexual trauma from childhood and just barfing it all over every character around him. And to me, it was kind of like the way that cable television and 24-hour news stations were beginning around this time. You're starting to see CNN at that point, and how the real world of America is finally invading the suburbs. I thought that was just a great way to show this battering ram of American culture, real American culture coming through that bullshit 50s veneer. That everything about this movie really appealed to me in that way.
it was kind of like the 1950s Douglas Sirk movies. Magnificent. I can't say that word. God, Magnificent Obsession. That kind of movie. And it's kind of, to me, was like that, but with something like The Postman Always Rings Twice or Double Indemnity, right below the surface of that idyllic thing. And that's what it made me think of, and how I was like always only ever thought about his movies, especially this movie when I kind of watched it on videotape, as just weird shit. Like all it is just weird shit. And I don't know if I understood it at that time, but watching this time, you get to know that if Kyle MacLachlan had not found the ear by chance, he would have gone on, lived in Pleasantville his whole, that kind of idyllic suburb for the rest of his life and would have never thought about anything underneath the surface of it. Laura Dern too, she gets drawn into it just because her dad is a cop and she kind of knows, Kyle MacLachlan. And she's got the perfect, high school cheerleader dating the football guy, but literally just scratch the surface, like with an ear. And they're in the middle of the seediest, kind of most outrageous scenarios they could get themselves in at that age. And just the mere presence of Dennis Hopper and Isabella Rossellini, they have that dark kind of aura about them. It was just it subverted my expectations because I never really watched it when I was in high school or junior high or whenever it came out. So yeah, I was really surprised by it. How much I enjoyed it too, because I mean,
I just think
I remember not liking this, and when you picked it, I was like, oh, okay. I've never seen Mulholland Drive, but I kind of want to see that. But but I am glad that I was able to see this as an adult who has seen enough movies and experienced enough in my life that I've seen both sides, like the dark underbelly, the true crime of it all. If this had really happened in a real life scenario, this would have been a true crime movie instead of a weird kind of like idyllic dystopian movie. So
the thing that I've always said now is movies don't change, you do. The movies are always the you change and your perspective changes and your experience changes you. And I definitely think that you need to have that maturity to take a look at a movie like Blue Velvet and see it for what it's really doing. The true crime aspect is just kind of, it's almost like he's seen what's coming. It's almost like Lynch has already seen our obsession with true crime is coming because, this is the kind of thing that people who listen to murder podcasts would live for, is the idea that we could get involved and maybe solve a murder or solve a crime or something like that. That is totally believable. We see it online all the time. There are people who want to be amateur detectives and get all the details, pump the cops for all the information so that they may be the one who could put the puzzle together. And since he doesn't have the internet, he didn't have a Reddit for him to go to. He was just going to put himself in this woman's closet. And
now, remember, like all the movies in the 80s had people like stowing away in other people's closets and getting, what
was it with 70s and 80s home design where they're like, we need this lurker closet where people can like, why would you need to spy on your clothes? Like you pull down the little wooden thing and it opens the slats and you can look at why would you need that inside your house? We need a pervert closet. Who's got a pervert closet?
Oh God, everybody did in the 70s and 80s.
Like there's a movie called Hider in the House with Gary Busey, and they've got like again that closet. Exactly. I mean, you find that closet in so many different movies because it's just there so that somebody can be inside it and look outside and see something. And it's like, why would that ever be in a home design? Well, all homes are designed by men, so I guess it makes sense at the time. I love Isabella Rossellini is the bridge between these two worlds. I think there's a lot implied that she did have, she was living that idyllic life in that small town beforehand, before the infection of Frank Booth comes in and destroys her life and drags her down. And then thus begins, this sort of, the infection that is Frank Booth. He is like a virus. He's just this awful amalgamation of all the terrible things that are happening to real people. And becoming the result of that and taking that out on society. That is such a great piece of work. And the idea that we get to the end of this movie and Kyle MacLachlan's whole thing works out is just, it's kind of perfect the way this movie ends, because that's certainly not how it would have played out. But that is how it would play out in a Hays Code movie, in a Cirque movie, in a 50s movie, when the government was still dictating that the good guys got to win and the bad guys got to lose, and we need to restore American values at the end of the movie, no matter how unrealistic it is. And Lynch takes that and he turns the volume up a little bit, to the point where like the end of Blue Velvet looks almost like the music video for Soundgarden's Black Hole Sun right before all the faces begin to melt. Because he's turned up the volume so much, he's turned up the brightness so much, it looks unrealistic. And that unrealistic look is intentional, because this is not what would have happened. Frank Booth would have killed that kid for sure. He would not have
immediately.
He never would have left the car that night. He would have been found in a field where they left him that night. He was not getting back to town. But again, that's what he's satirizing. He's taking that Hays Code perfection and turning it on its ear. It's like, I'm going to give you what they want, but from the way I'm doing it, it's not how this would have played out. It's just that fantasy version that people like Reagan and the right are trying to sell you about how perfect America is, when you absolutely know it's not.
Yeah. I feel like everybody, this was his most mainstream, I guess. Because everybody has a happy ending, and that's not something that I think of when I think of David Lynch. That's not. I don't think everybody is going to walk away unscathed, how people mostly are in this movie.
But I don't think it necessarily is that way. I think it's all just a surface area. Like, I think for the character.
Oh no!
Yes, it is it's a happy ending for them, but it's not what's really happening.
No, he called it his most hopeful movie because you see everybody kind of quote unquote happy at the end.
Yeah.
Everybody gets kind of what they want and what they need. So I don't know. It's really, I'm glad I saw it as an adult and not just as a child.
Yeah. I couldn't be happier to have seen it. It's really kind of rising even the more I talk about it. I wrote 2,500 words about it already, and I can't shake those thoughts about all the various different meanings that you can read into this. I mean, and just Dennis Hopper. I mean, after this, he can't get a role that isn't Frank Booth, diluted down to a way, diluted in a way that people can tolerate. But he's incredible. I mean, I thought, and I'm not making a comparison. I'm just saying that for me, when it comes to, 4-letter words, there's probably nobody better than Melissa McCarthy. She just has a way of deploying them that are hilarious. She's always funny when she curses. It's always funny. But Dennis Hopper, it's not funny when he does it. It feels like a threat. Every 4-letter word feels like a goddamn threat. It feels like he's shooting at you.
56 times he says the word fuck in all but one of his sentences. And like what you just said though about him, and after this movie he couldn't get just a straight role. Howard Payne from Speed is Frank Booth. He's just Frank Booth. He never he got all the accolades for this movie, and I think he just said, you know what, I'm just doing that from now on. Hot quiz, hot shot. That's Frank Booth, PG-13 pop.
Yeah, it's Hollywood Frank Booth, But even something as stupid as the Mario Brothers movie, it has elements of Frank Booth.
Yeah. I don't see him as anything more than that, that characterization that he does.
Mm-hmm.
And now that I know what that's from, it's like, oh, okay, he really leaned into that characterization that he just kept doing. So
right. He also had a lot of money problems, and I'm sure there were people asking him to just do that, and it was probably a little bit easier for him to just keep doing that because that's what was getting him roles and making him what little money he could make that he wasn't already sending out of his door. Very interesting life for Dennis Hopper. And a tremendous actor who before this, I mean, did do, other things. He was, there's a movie called Out of the Blue that is incredible that nobody's really seen. He's and I'm not a big fan of Easy Rider, but, taking that character and then kind of turning up the volume on it to make that character sort of like what happens in Apocalypse Now. I thought there was I thought he was doing interesting variations on the thing that he does. And then after Frank Booth, it's pretty much just Frank Booth.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm like I said, I'm just glad I got to see it as an adult. I'm sad that it took, David Lynch dying to see it, but
yeah. All right, well, Jeff, the Academy Award nominations come out on Thursday. We'll talk about those on the next show. It appears people are saying that Emilia Perez is going to get the most nominations. I'm not sure how I feel about that movie anymore now that I've learned more about it. I think I liked it, but now I'm not so sure. Starting to feel, oh yeah, it's just there's some things. But yeah. But it'll be interesting to see. I do think Nora deserves more, but like somehow Nora is not even getting the kind of talk that the Brutalist and Emilia Perez and Conclave are getting, which is bizarre to me because Nora has won more critics awards than any other movie by a lot. Even the Brutalist is way behind Nora in terms of critic awards, and yet it looks like and Emilia Perez. I mean, the only thing it's received from critics is a supporting actress nomination for Zoe Saldana, not even winning any Best Pictures. It seems like there's just something weird going on. I don't know. I don't like it. I don't like it. I don't like some of the stuff that's out there. And there's apparently people trying. There's a whisper campaign around the Brutalist now about Brady Corbett used AI in the movie, and it's like he only used it to add subtitles or something. But now that's a whisper campaign going on to try and undermine that movie, and it just kind of. It all makes the Oscars look. Not the Oscars have ever looked great.
I think, honestly, I've seen a few people say that they shouldn't even have the Oscars this year because of what's going on in LA. I've also heard the argument, hey, a lot of the people that live in LA who are the working people who lost their homes work in the entertainment industry and, are IATSE members and should, this is one of their big things that they don't want them to miss out on that money. And I don't know, it's going to be a weird year for the Oscars. I think it'll probably be a lot like 2021 with COVID.
Yeah.
But I think the ceremony, if it's different this year, which I think it kind of should go on to get those people paid. And I don't think a lot of the Hollywood people are going to want to skip the chance to make a speech about our current political climate. So it would be very interesting to see who gets nominated. My money is still on Demi Moore getting nominated for Best Actress. That's who I'm really, really hoping. I've given up on most horror people ever getting nominated for a horror role, but who knows?
Now the substance is going to get nominated for Best Picture. Demi will get a Best Actress. Margaret Qualley's a shoo-in for supporting actress nomination. The big question on the substance is whether or not Coralie Fargett gets a Best Director nomination, and that's really the one that everybody needs to be watching at the moment. If that doesn't happen, that's going to be rough. It's going to be rough because it's going to be a 5-man field then. I don't see any other female directors getting in, which is unfortunate. And but I don't know. Coleman Domingo and Clarence Macklin from Sing Sing are both likely to get nominated. So at least maybe that'll tamp down some of that conversation. I hope not. I mean, we do still need to have that conversation because it's not over. But at least the Hollywood will be able to pat itself on the back and go, look, Black people were nominated.
Gay Black people.
Coleman,
I just
go the nicest human being in the world, by the way.
He really, I am acquainted with one of his ex-boyfriends, and they're like best friends, and he's just like, oh my god, I love him so much. Like we're not together for reasons, but he's just the best guy, and you should, if you ever get the chance to meet him, tell him I said that. And I'm like, okay.
That's awesome. Oh, I love that.
So from all accounts, he is exactly who he portrays himself to be. So
let's see. Next week, there are a number of new movies. Whether or not I don't know which ones you're probably not going to want to see. Flight Risk, I assume.
I like Topher Grace and hate Marky Mark.
And the director.
Oh God, yeah. Oh. Can we just not watch it?
Maybe. I don't know. We'll see.
I'm looking forward to Presence.
Yeah, that one's looking interesting. Steven Soderbergh directed that one, and it seems like we've been a while. It seems like a smaller film too, which I think his smaller movies are always way more interesting. Nothing against his big movies; he's done good big movies, but his smaller films, like Bubble, is really just an underrated film, and The Girlfriend Experience is another one that people should see that they haven't. Those are two really interesting, fascinating movies. So check those out. There's a movie called Brave the Dark, and another one that I think is only in theaters for 2 days. I'm not sure what the hell this is about. Marked Men Rule and Shaw. Is this some kind of young adult teen thing? I have no idea. But I think it's a Fathom event. I don't know why. Who knows?
Now I have to look that up.
Yeah. Let me know what you find out. Marked Men Rule and Shaw. But it's a teen romance. I don't know. I don't know why it's called Marked Men. It's a bizarre combination.
Oh, I bet. I'm looking at a picture of it. It's by Nick Cassavetes.
Really?
Yeah. And I'm looking at a picture of it. He's covered in tattoos, so maybe that's what it means.
Oh, it's a tattoo. I think. Yeah. Okay.
Shaw has loved Rule since she saw him, but Rule doesn't see her as a suitable match. But a night of drinking and secrets leads them to question if they can be together without ruining their relationship or each other.
I can beat that. I can beat that. Check out the description of Brave the Dark. When Mr. Dean, Jared Harris, discovers one of his students has been living out of his car and thrown into jail, he decides to bail him out. Determined to curb Nate's destructive behavior, Mr. Dean quickly discovers a host of dark secrets that are slowly tearing Nate apart. What started as a good deed becomes a desperate fight to save Nate from his own demons. As Nate spirals deeper into despair, Mr. Dean must decide how far he's willing to go to save a kid on the brink of losing everything, even himself.
That's based on a true story, am I right?
Is it really?
I think it is. I read the description for it when I was seeing what was coming up. I think it's based on a true story.
Sure.
And
that is a very silly description.
Damian Harris, is that Jared Harris's dad or son?
Could be. I don't know.
I bet he is. Oh, no, maybe his dad?
But I really laughed hard.
Born in 1958.
I laughed very hard at that description. Even himself.
Yeah. Let me see here. I think that means that he is. Oh no, it's his brother. Jared Harris is his brother. His father was Richard Harris, which I didn't know. Jared Harris was his son.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah, he's not a bad actor, but that description really is cringy.
Yeah, I mean, based on a true story, I just looked at it and I'm like, is this a PureFlix thing? Because it looks like it.
I hope his career hasn't fallen that far.
Oh, and this came out this was done in 2023.
Eesh. That's got
and it's just not coming to theaters.
That's got all the markers of something just not good.
So next week we're talking about presents.
I would, take a look at Soderbergh. If there's a classic Soderbergh you're interested in, I think that's the direction to go.
Yeah.
All right, Jeff. We'll catch up
right.
next week.
Sounds good.